Poland is a beautiful country sitting in the center of Europe, but as for many other European nations, despite high literacy, English is not the native tongue. I like to think, in my experience, when people refer to Western releases of Japanese products, the conversation is almost always centered on its English localizations, even more specifically, normally on the US. Thanks in part to the sheer size and population of the United States and Canada, both primarily English-speaking countries that make up a majority of the totality of Europe's rival population, not to even include parts of Europe like the mainly English-speaking UK. Because of this, ignorantly, but understandably so, I think it fails to even cross many US citizens' minds the work that goes into localizing more individual regions and languages. The work of bringing great anime and manga to other countries and cultures. And something else that might surprise you, sometimes these countries even get series years before the exclusively English-speaking world does. So that's where I'm going today. Poland. In person, to visit Poland's largest localization chain. I just got out of the shower, and it is almost 3 a.m. in the morning. Fully awake, ready to go, gonna have some caffeine, and then join on my flight. A 45-hour transit, because honestly I have no money to do trips like these. First, from Austin to New York City. I come in on the EWR, then transfer to JFK. Then, an overnight flight from JFK to Oslo's OSL airport in Norway. From there, a 30-minute train to Oslo Central Station, followed by a 2-hour train and a short taxi to a hotel outside Torp Airport. I haven't slept in 40 hours. I finally got into my room here in Norway. I'm in Oslo. I have one more flight tomorrow, and I'll finally be in Poland. This has been considerably more taxing than I thought it would be. Next morning, from Torp Airport to Wrocław, and I have arrived. Yatta.pl is the uncontested champion for localization distribution of anime and manga in Poland with, by my count, just over 30 stores. It would be an exhausting venture to check them all out, so I have organized for a visit to one of Poland's most beautiful cities, which largely maintains many of its old architecture, and the old capital of Poland, Krakow, to give many of you all something that you would probably otherwise have never seen or even thought to have. Let's talk localization, though. Something in English spheres that often leads to a big uproar, and occasionally rightfully so, I'll admit, is the task of preserving the intent and character of a language's meaning. Sometimes means differing from its literal word-for-word translation, but sometimes people's ideas of these meanings to be transferred is off the mark, and even worse, sometimes maliciously so. An example of a direct translation that I don't like is laid-back camp. Like, I've never met someone to not just call it Yuru camp. Yuru camp is so much easier, it flies off the tongue, it sounds nicer, but the official translation isn't wrong in any measurable way. Laid back is actually a very good way to directly translate a concept like Yuru, relaxing, laying back, kicking your feet up. It just doesn't roll off the tongue or come across as nicely. Let's look at a total opposite example. My dress-up darling. The original, Sono bisque doll wa koi wa suru, directly translates to something like the porcelain doll that fell in love, or the bisque doll in love, if you prefer. The translation here preserved almost nothing of the original title, but instead keeps the focus on Gojo's perspective and the connection of the dolls with the costumes that he makes for Marin. The darling also hinting at the romance angle. It's actually a really smart localization, as it preserves much of the intent of the original title without really preserving anything else. The Polish for this is Project Cosplay, completely different from either of the two. It just so happens project and cosplay are the same words in Polish other than a minor spelling difference, so I don't have to translate much to English here. Here, it returns to a neutral perspective and focuses the most on what the story is actually about. A cosplaying project between Marin and Gojo. Despite the series being centered around cosplay, this is the only title that actually states so on the cover. Erased in English, never maintained its lengthened Japanese title in Polish, going from essentially Boku dake ga inai machi, or the town where only I am missing, to Miasto ze Sorego. I don't know how to pronounce. I don't know how to pronounce Polish. I'll be honest. I don't know what to do. Or a city I disappeared from. Generally, though, most Polish titles follow this sort of pattern, giving a sensible direct translation, or just something that lets you know what the thing is about. A title that differed more heavily from its Japanese is Bungo Stray Dogs, which remains the same in English and Japanese due to Romanji, but in Polish is Bezpańskie Literacy, which is a bit complicated to translate. Essentially, literacy is literacy, and the first word is a plural term for a stray thing, like a dog or a cat. Another one to differ somewhat is the way of the house husband, or in Japanese, Gokushu Furo, in Polish as Yakuza w fartuszku, which translates as Yakuza in an apron. I hope that you can see why I'm interested in seeing these differences now. They're fun. Now, the limited population does affect output speed, and unfortunately, while this does mean that some big series are not fully out yet, sometimes it's not always negative. Sometimes it means that some series get there before English speakers get them, although some series that sadly have completed their run in translation in English are still getting new translated volumes in Poland. Things like Haikyuu, Demon Slayer, JoJo, which is still on Part 3, and Ranma 1/2. Many big recent series like Tokyo Revengers lag behind, and some classics like Inuyasha are still chugging along to the completion. While I certainly don't envy this release schedule overall, there is one place that I was super jealous, though, and that is the release of my favorite anime series of all time, which until recently was not picked up by any English publishers. Sangatsu no Lion, or March Comes In Like a Lion, has not only had copies out in Poland for years, but has the manga at a place far past its 2 double-core anime seasons. Many volumes past, in fact. A whole nother season, in fact. As it sits now, people fluent in Polish have more access to my most beloved anime series' original story than any English-exclusive speakers do. So here's Yatta.pl in downtown Wrocław. Yuki was gracious enough to let me stay at her place and show me around Poland during our visit, again, making hotels mostly unneeded, which made my trip substantially cheaper. One of the big things I was pleasantly surprised about were the multiple sections of the store dedicated to LGBT stories and the prevalence of yaoi and yuri works unashamedly. Poland is still deeply Catholic in its traditions, and many rural areas have even passed laws enacting what amounts to, in theory, LGBT-free areas, as they themselves call it. Gay marriage as well as civil unions are still not legally recognized in the country. Conversion therapy is not banned. Employers can discriminate based upon perceived sexuality, and there are no housing protections against gay folks either. Still, like even the most rural places in America, you would never be able to tell in the cities. People are open and happy to show their support, and the younger generations are, of course, significantly more accepting and informed. So it's good to see an anime and manga chain not shy away from this, as historically anime and manga has focused much more heavily on specific niches, interests, and groups in its art that have otherwise been left out of the mainstream. After seeing Yatta, we explored more of Wrocław, including meeting with longtime patrons. We got along a lot more naturally than I could have ever expected. We did Korean karaoke and visited a gaming-themed bar. It was a great time. Boarding the train to Krakow, we laid in transit for over 2 hours until arriving in the previous capital's glory. Unfortunately, it rained on the first day, but nonetheless, Yatta Part 2. The Krakow Location for Yatta was similar size to the Wrocław Location, although a bit farther of a walk away from the center square. Just the same, they had their gay manga on full display, and I noticed a few more snacks and things too, which Yuki picked up a box of. There were also seemingly some house-made mystery box packages like you can get at different anime conventions, and some imported American and English merchandise there as well for different anime. This is Krakow's Yatta. I guess I should also mention the obvious of yatta being a Japanese word to express excitement over something. Something like hooray in English, or an exasperated yes. It's a cute name that I haven't seen a lot of similar copies to. In the US, most stores with anime stuff just have anime in the title somewhere, and most restaurants recycle the same Sakura, Ski, Kobe, etc. list of like 10 Japanese words, so this felt thoughtful and nice to me. With that, I only have so much time and resources, so I was already, as short as it was, on my way back, on my journey back home. I'm back. In summary, Poland was beautiful. I have never been to Europe before. It was my first adventure over there. I can't believe I had the guts to do it all by myself and in such a small bag. Not even a carry-on, just literally a personal item bag that I put under my seat. It would have been, of course, impossible for me to have achieved this and been able to financially pay for it, if expensive as a trip like this would be, if not for the fact that I didn't have to pay for room and board most of the time because of my girlfriend Yuki, who I mentioned prior. I have to thank her for that. The whole trip was possible because of her, really. Still, while this was pretty cheap, I mean, it took me 45 hours to get there and 35 hours to get back, with all the different transfers I did and everything just to save costs, it still was quite a bit of money. So if you liked this video and would like to see videos more like this in the future, I would definitely appreciate your support on Patreon. I think I don't need to explain why this sort of thing kind of demands more money than a typical video does. So yeah, please like, comment, share the video, and the most effective, of course, supporting me financially. Even if, Patreon's not your thing, I'm on Twitch too. Speaking of course, before we get into the patron question, I want to talk about my top patrons, my leading patrons: Daniel Frowsing, Zioma, Benny, Youngsuk Chong, Rob Paulson, Khalil Waldron, and all my other supporters. A reminder that code HIDING gets you 10% off any GamerSupps products as well, which is pretty nice. Good replacement for energy drinks, 0 calorie, lots of caffeine. It's good. And so now, I think the fitting Patreon question for this video is Yuki's question. What was your favorite place to visit in Poland? Okay, so for me, I have a couple different answers. I think in terms of raw, cool factor and unique things that I haven't seen before, I think visiting the National Museum in Wrocław was really cool. There was a lot of 13th, 14th, 15th century art, old Christian sculptures and whatnot that have been preserved, and I thought they were super cool. I love that sort of thing. I've always loved that sort of thing, so it was really cool seeing the really old art. So part of me wants to say that was my favorite, but at the same time, I'm not sure. I really liked downtown Krakow and the inside of the church that's right on the corner there. That cathedral was gorgeous, unbelievably beautiful to look at. And I just love old buildings and old architecture, so that was really good. At the same time, again, I would say Castle Książ was also a really gorgeous one. We went to Zamek Król Wawel, or the Wawel Castle. We went there, but yeah, no, I think Książ was a lot prettier, I guess. The sheer architecture and the outside gardens and just all of it was so beautiful. But again, we're talking about cool things that you can really only get in Poland. I'd say those are probably my best answers. For me, though, I think the best time I had was in Zakopane, which was really surprising because it was rainy and cold, so we weren't able to hike. See, Zakopane is a big mountainous area with lots of hiking spots. We were going to hike there, but it was too cold and too rainy, so we stayed in the hotel the whole time. Just so happens that I got a really good deal on a hotel that was just like normal US price, and it ended up being like the most insane, amazing hotel I've ever been to. There was this came free with our room. It was like $100 USD, basically. I think maybe like 120 or something. We got a sauna and jacuzzi free, like with our room. Just we had to register what time we were going to be in there, and it's private. And then there was a restaurant on the bottom floor, like basement area. It was like an Italian restaurant. Amazingly high quality food, very cheap once again, and a complimentary breakfast, which was the most elaborate and fancy breakfast I've ever had in my entire life. It was like, insane. Like, if I had a hotel of this quality in the US, I feel like it would have cost, like, $700. And if it cost that much, I would have been thinking to myself the whole time, oh my gosh, I wasted my money and not even enjoy the good things. So, the fact that it was, like, normal, like, Holiday Inn, cost, like, if my family wanted to come visit me right now in Austin, and they just stayed at, like, the basic hotel, they'd probably spend, like, almost as much money. So, the fact it was so cheap, and so cool, and so good. It was also on May 3rd, so it was the Constitution Day. So they had this giant, like, 80-foot Polish flag that was being carried by multiple people through the streets, and we had a balcony in our room. We were able to watch it, and it was just, oh my gosh. That day was so perfect. It literally felt like I was just, like, living in a dream. And, of course, the best part about Poland really was hanging out with my girlfriend. So, being able to spend all that time, just her and I, just having fun, with, all the sauna and everything. It was great. It was great. But while I do think that was probably the most stress-free, like, fun I had, it feels weird to give that, like, my favorite thing that I did in Poland, because in theory, if you knew where to go and you had the right money, you could probably experience something similar to that in many places. So yeah, I would say a better answer would be the National Museum or Castle Książ, and maybe downtown Krakow and one of the cathedrals there, or a couple of cathedrals there were actually really good. Yeah, really, there was just endless things. Pierogi, that's the real answer. Pierogi, pierogi, that's the real answer. All right, yeah. So thank you for watching. I would love to do this again in the future. Please continue supporting me any way you can, and I'll see you soon.